I'm Callie from CRK Training, and today I would like to talk about a topic in working with horses that is important to understand. You've probably heard of this before. It's the idea of fight, flight, or freeze as a model for thinking about how the nervous system responds to stress, to fear, basically to perceived threats. What I want to do today is go a bit deeper and explore how on each one of these three responses, there's quite a bit of a big continuum, meaning we can have the very beginning of the response, and then we can have the full-blown one that I think is what usually comes to mind visually, especially when we hear words like fight or flight. Why this is important is because when we can notice the first signs that our horse is starting to have these experiences and is going into one of these states, we can change something that we're doing, we can help the horse come to a better state, and we can prevent going all the way to some of these really big responses where the horse can get hurt, where people can get hurt. So let's start with looking at fight. So if we think about the response of fight, what probably comes to mind first is basically what the word is describing, aggression. So this can be going into aggression, going into attack mode. This can be oftentimes coming from a defensive place, but with the horse we see behaviors like striking, we see behaviors like kicking. We can see the horse even lunging at people sometimes with teeth open. All of these are things that the horse can do when they're fully in fight mode. But the signs of this start way before. So even a horse that's just braced is starting in this continuum of fight. So with brace, think of a horse that you ask them to move and they just stiffen up. Sometimes these horses are called stubborn, or sometimes they're even called lazy, he doesn't want to work. But if the horse is really actively bracing, he's actually starting down this continuum, this response of fight. In the next one, we have flight. Again, we think of this in the full-blown one as a horse that's bolting, that's out of control, running away from the rider, and has lost its senses and just taken off and gone into full flight mode to get away from whatever spooked it, whatever startled it. But again, this idea of flight can start even with something like a simple head away. It can often sometimes go, maybe a next step here would be into startles. But when I say head away, think of this as being when you go to approach your horse and you put your hand out and they move away from you. Or maybe you go to put your hand out and they have that little startle and they move away. Those are the first signs that the horse is actually maybe thinking about a flight response. Some of the other signs of getting ready for flight are when we see a horse that is standing in a way that they look like they're poised for movement. So you often see where the legs appear stiff, the eyes are really wide, the nostrils are flaring. That's a horse that is probably experiencing quite a bit of stress, and the body is preparing for flight in the full mode of bolting. The next sign here, or the next response, is freeze. So freeze, I think, is one that many people are most unfamiliar with, and it's actually an idea that I want to explore more in another video that we're going to have coming up. It's the idea that a horse that is really still is not necessarily a horse that is feeling okay or that is calm. We have to take a deeper look at it. So the basic freeze response can be as simple as just going inward. And this is when you see a horse that is under some level of stress, but it kind of looks like their eyes just glaze over. They might even start to close their eyes. Their breathing may even go down. And it looks like they're just kind of disappearing from the world around them. They may appear to be unresponsive, but they're not necessarily okay on the inside. The most extreme version of freeze is something that we actually see that has a survival response. The term for it is tonic immobility, and you'll see it as a response in prey animals when an animal is taken down. So think to like an African safari movie that you've watched or documentary that you've watched. When the gazelle gets taken down, when they hit the ground, they'll actually go stiff. And the reason for this is because the brain, the nervous system basically signals that once you're on the ground, the more that you're thrashing around, the more likely you are to sustain faster injuries and more blood loss. So once you hit the ground, go stiff and go quiet. There's multiple changes that occur in this state as far as blood flow, breathing and heart rate can actually go way down as well in order to be part of the survival response. But this can happen to horses in extreme cases. There is some thought that the old horseman's training method of laying a horse down with ropes, putting them on the ground and then doing stuff when they're on the ground was a way to gentle the horse or to create dominance over the horse. But in reality, what was happening when that horse laid there quietly and then stood back up quietly was probably that they were going into a state of tonic immobility. So when we can recognize subtle signs of freeze, when we start seeing the horse under stress, that all of a sudden appears that they're just going inward. Again, that light goes out of their eyes. They might start even closing their eyes. When we can recognize this, we can prevent the times where it feels like the horse exploded out of the blue. And that's true for all of these different responses. When we start noticing the subtle first steps to a horse's stress response, we can make better decisions, we can potentially make changes to what we're doing, we can lower the stress in the environment around them, we can change how we're asking for something in order to prevent going to one of these extremes of the continuum of these responses. Now I would love to hear from you. When is a time that you noticed a horse going into one of these subtle responses? What happened? What did you notice? What did you see about the horse that made you realize what was happening? Leave a comment down below. If you're watching this anywhere besides crktrainingblog.com, that's where the best comments and the best conversation happens. I would love to see you there. And there's also a link down below if you're interested in joining me in a workshop from my program, the Balanced Riding course, to learn more about horse behavior and how we can be better trainers, better riders, and better caretakers of our horses. I would love to have you join me in this free training from the Balanced Riding course.